Hi. So we are the Hysteria Study Collective. We are just everyday folks who decided to learn about this topic and wanted to share what we learned with everyone else. We have been studying for about 4 to 6 weeks, and then we decided to host this as our second presentation or workshop that we've done, and the idea is that we would have more study groups, and those people who were in the study groups could have more study groups, and that it just would get the information would be spread as far as it can. So I am Andie, and
I'm Michaela. I'm Hava.
And there's a few other group members that couldn't be here tonight, but we're super excited to share this with you. We are mostly talking about self-managed abortion, but we want to acknowledge that we're coming from a reproductive justice framework or standpoint, which shows that not only should people be free to not have babies when they don't want to, but to have babies when they do want to, and also to raise those kiddos in a safe and welcoming environment. So we're working towards all of that, but in this moment we're just presenting on SMA or self-managed abortion right now. All right, so first up we are going to talk about fertility awareness.
All right. I want to make sure I can see everybody. So my name is Michaela. I use she, they pronouns. I'm going to start talking about fertility awareness because it's one of the things that can help us learn about our bodies. And we know in this time, learning about our bodies is powerful, and it can give us information to use on top of maybe birth control or other methods, so that we can be informed and prevent pregnancies if that is what we want to do. So I just wanted to share a little bit about my experience with fertility awareness. I was never really into tracking or anything, but I got an IUD when I was like in my early 20s, and not knowing much about birth control, even though I was working at a women's health clinic. I thought like natural family planning and fertility awareness was kind of just like something you would do if you didn't care if you got pregnant or not. But in this study group, I think I've become more aware that it's actually something that you can use to learn more about your body, to feel empowered and present, and then use it on top of any other form that maybe you're using to prevent pregnancy. And it's really helped me feel like empowered, because all of our bodies work differently. We can talk like, oh, you know, like I know I'm ovulating at this time because of this, but that may not be the same as it is for me as it is for Andie or Hava. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that. So some signs that our bodies could be ovulating. Just something I learned in even preparing for this was that our female bodies typically ovulate with any type of birth control. So I thought like with IUDs, ovulation may be stopped. And in some very small cases it does, but in most forms of birth control, you are still ovulating. So you can track that on top of using other methods. So signs that our bodies are ovulating could be like that egg white discharge that's kind of like slimy. And I'm just going to hop right into it. Like, I know if your body produces this discharge, like if you're anything like me, you have like played with it and been like, ooh, this is kind of fun. So I think like that is a sign that we can track and be like, oh, this is a symptom of ovulation. And then when that is... Oh, thanks, Hava. Ovulation is when an egg is released from the fallopian tubes, and is like, that is when you are most fertile. Is there anything to add?
If I'm most fertile, why would I want to know that?
So if you're most fertile and you are engaging in penetrative sex with someone that produces sperm, that could lead to pregnancy. So if you aren't ovulating and you're having sex with someone that produces sperm, it is less likely but still possible that you get pregnant, because sperm can live inside of your body for, I don't know the exact amount, 4 or 5 days, 5 days. So it's important to know when we ovulate, because it's like before, it's after, if we're having consistent sex with someone that does produce sperm. So other signs other than the cervical fluid that I would talk about playing with would be like change in body temperature. So if you're really into fertility tracking, or if it interests you, you can take your body temperature every morning. Typically, when you're ovulating, your body temperature will drop slightly and then go back up after ovulation. So you know when your body temperature drops, that could be a sign that an egg is being released and you're more fertile in that window. That, as well as like tender breasts, bloating, cramps. And I don't know about any of you, but I feel like there have been times where I have like physically felt myself ovulating, like a sharp pain, and just being like, oh, I wonder if that's what it is. And so the more we think about being in tune with our bodies and tracking these things, the more we can be like, I know that is what it is. And I know that if I desire to have sex during this time frame, maybe I could talk about pleasure in a different way. Maybe it could be toys, or like use a condom or a withdrawal method on top of it, just so that you have this extra addition of like, if you do choose to be on birth control, an extra addition on top of that to prevent pregnancy. So basically, fertility awareness for me means that we're using this information and tracking our symptoms to decide when these symptoms are present and make the best choice for ourselves, so that we can have autonomy over our bodies. And then, of course, like, birth control is never 100% effective. Something in this group that we were talking about is like, even IUDs are 99% effective, but that means that like 1 in every 100 people that use IUDs may experience a pregnancy. And that's a lot to think about in a world where we can't have access to termination, if that's something that we would desire. Let me see. I think that might be it for fertility awareness. And then I just wanted to talk about tracking and the safe apps. But before I talk about tracking apps, does anyone have questions or things that they would want to add around fertility awareness or knowing our bodies? So the last thing I'm going to touch on are the tracking apps that are safe. So as many people have probably been reading, there are a lot of period tracking apps that are selling data. And if prosecution in our state happens, or, you know, like, we can see very closely a world where accessing even self-managed abortions could be really dangerous. We want to have apps that can help us do these things without having to worry for our safety. So Clue is one of these apps. I have Clue downloaded on my phone. So after this, like, if anyone is curious or wants to see the app, you can come talk to me and I'll show you how it works. The nice thing about Clue, as I mentioned, I still have my IUD, so I typically don't bleed very much. But with Clue, I can track like just my discharge or things that would mark ovulation. So that is really nice. Clue is a female-run app that is based out of Europe, and they apply to European privacy laws. So they have statements on their website that you can look into. Clue does keep some data, but they have vouched, because of the European privacy laws, to never sell that data. If you wanted to use an app that does not collect any data at all, Yuki, which is spelled EUKI, I think it's like named after eucalyptus. That app does not collect any data whatsoever. So that is extremely safe as well. I guess the last thing I would want to touch on is just reminding people, if you do need birth control, if you want to get on it, if you need refills or are deciding to switch methods, there is still a lot of access around Tucson. Although Planned Parenthood is no longer providing abortion services, they are providing all other services, so STI testing, preventative health care, and birth control.
Do they not even provide abortion?
It is changing back and forth, but last time we checked, Planned Parenthood is not providing those services. There are some places in the state that are providing abortion services, but it can change really like day to day.
I'm going to talk about self-managed abortion. And the reason we're talking about self-managed abortion is because it's the most accessible form of abortion that is available to people who can become pregnant. And that's true here in Arizona, and it's true in all 50 states, regardless of what the law in that state says, because you can receive abortion pills through the mail. And I also just want to say that one, abortion is fucking awesome. I've had 2 of them, and I also have had 3 children. And I think having abortions is not an embarrassing thing to say. It's a great thing to say that we've had them. I wish when I was a 21-year-old and had an abortion, or a 22-year-old, and had an abortion, that somebody had talked to me about having had one before, but I didn't know a single person who had admitted to me or ever told me that they had had an abortion. So I felt really alone in that. And now it's a totally different landscape. It's a totally different world. I have 2 children who could possibly become pregnant based off of their bodies, and another child who could help someone else get pregnant based off of their body. And in our household, we talk about abortion in a really chill and open way. And I hope that that's how we can all talk about it going forward from tonight, if you don't already talk about it like that. But self-managed abortion doesn't replace clinic access. And I want to underscore that. We should be able to have the kind of abortion that we need and that we want. And here in Arizona and in at least 22 other states in the country, abortion clinic access is becoming more and more restricted, if not gone entirely. And that is leaving many tens of millions of people who can become pregnant in this country in a seriously dangerous situation. It's a dangerous situation because we have the highest maternal mortality rate of all industrialized countries in the world. We also have a rate among Black women in particular that's 3 times worse than white women in this country who already, and other people who can become pregnant, who already have the worst in industrialized countries in the world. So it's dangerous to be pregnant, and it is actually safer to terminate a pregnancy, medically speaking, than it is to carry it all the way to term and deliver your baby. That is not the world that I'm interested in living in, which is why we brought up reproductive justice in the beginning. And that framework from Loretta Ross and Sister Song is put out there by Black women in the 90s, talking about this issue, talking about women should be able, and those who can become pregnant should be able to choose whether they want to have a baby, choose whether they don't want to have a baby. And if they choose to have a baby, that baby should be free from things like violent death at the hands of the police, which is also a major concern if you're a Black woman giving birth to a Black baby in this country, right? So reproductive justice also includes things like police and prison abolition and those kind of frameworks. So we're going to talk about self-managed abortion, and we're going to talk about it in a way that feels a little bit awkward. I'm not going to talk about what you should do, because that would be me giving you medical advice. And that's not legal for me to give you medical advice. But it's 100% legal for me, someone who's not a doctor, and I'm just a person, to give you information, medical information. And all of the information that I'm going to give you is from the World Health Organization and what they say about self-managed abortion. And this information is available to people all over the world who have the capacity to become pregnant. So there are some things that you need to know before you do a self-managed abortion. And the most important thing to do is confirm that you're pregnant. You might think maybe you're pregnant, but you don't want to take abortion pills unless you know that you're pregnant as a person. So confirming that you're pregnant, which is why we talked about fertility awareness and tracking your menstrual cycles. That's a first line of defense in making sure that you have access to all of your reproductive options by knowing you're pregnant as soon as possible. And so trying to really share that information with as many people as you know, that tracking menstrual cycles and knowing about fertility for your own body is a first line of defense. And so share that. Like if you share anything, share that tonight. The earlier you know, the more options that one has, right? The other things are for self-managed abortion. The World Health Organization says that for up to 12 weeks of pregnancy, and weeks of pregnancy are dated starting with the date of your last menstrual cycle. So when you hear 6-week pregnancy ban in Texas, it doesn't mean that you're 6 weeks past the last time you had a period. It means you're 2 weeks-ish for an average human since the last time that you had a menstrual cycle. So it's a little confusing the way that that's tracked. But the World Health Organization says that abortion pills are 98% safe for anyone to take if they're less than 12 weeks pregnant. They also advise against some particularly serious illnesses. I'm not going to go into the list. There's like 3 of those illnesses. And also you cannot have an IUD in at the same time as using abortion pills. You have to have the IUD removed first. And so that requires a clinician to do it. Although some people do remove their own IUDs and manage that in a home setting as well. And you can also read about that on the internet. I'm not going to give you all the details. The other thing that you want to do as a precaution is making a plan and having accompaniment, not being alone without someone around when you're using abortion pills. And having a reliable way to the hospital in less than 2 hours of time. So for people who live in an urban area, most people who live in an urban area could get to a hospital in like 15 to 30 minutes very easily. But it's a much bigger concern for people in rural communities who abortion pills are a huge relief for people in rural communities because clinic access is so inaccessible to people who live in rural areas. But you need to be in a place where you could get to that hospital care in the rare chance of an emergency with less than 2 hours of travel time. And the last thing, but it's the most important thing about self-managed abortion of all of the things to know beforehand, is that you should be the person choosing. The person who is pregnant should be the person choosing to have the abortion. And it should be something that you are certain that you want to do. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the possibilities why you want to be certain in the rare chances that the pills do not fully work. So there are 2 different ways that people can use abortion pills. There's 2 kinds of abortion pills. One's called mifepristone, and the other is called misoprostol. They can be used together in like paired dosing, or you can use misoprostol alone and only that drug by itself. So what mifepristone does in one's body, if you're a person who has the capacity to get pregnant, mifepristone stops the hormone progesterone, which is what is, your body relies upon the production of progesterone at really high levels to maintain a pregnancy. So what mifepristone does is it makes the uterus no longer hospitable to hosting a pregnancy. A pregnancy can't continue without that hormone in play. Mifepristone stops the production of that hormone, which then weakens the lining of the uterus, which has been growing to then, provide nutrients to a pregnancy as it's implanting. And that uterine lining starts to deteriorate. Then misoprostol does something else entirely. What it does is it causes the uterus to contract. It causes the same thing that happens when someone menstruates every month, and your uterus contracts. Some people notice that as cramps. Some people notice it more than others. And that's also the exact same thing that a uterus does in labor or in a miscarriage to expel a pregnancy, is having these contractions. And so what misoprostol does in partnership with mifepristone is it comes in after the uterine lining has been weakened by the mifepristone, the progesterone hormone has stopped in production, and then misoprostol comes in and it causes the uterus to contract and expel the contents of the uterus. And so those 2 drugs can be used together, or misoprostol can be used all on its own. I'm going to talk about the rest of the time tonight using misoprostol on its own. The reason I'm going to talk about misoprostol-only self-managed abortion is because that drug, for particularly people who live in a border state, can be more accessible than getting mifepristone and misoprostol together. Because mifepristone is, its only purpose is for use in an abortion or to help resolve an incomplete miscarriage. It has no other purpose. Whereas misoprostol, that drug was discovered as useful for inducing abortion by women in Brazil in the 1980s. Collective of women then started researching it themselves, lay people, not medical professionals, feminists who thought that birth control and abortion should be accessible to more people who had the capacity to be pregnant. And so they did their own research and found, oh, this drug says right here on the label, don't take this drug for stomach ulcers if you're pregnant because it could cause contractions. And they're like, oh, it could cause contractions. Well, maybe we could use that for inducing an abortion. And they found that it was extremely safe. In fact, the organization, there's some info up here about them. They're called SAS, or Self-Managed Abortion Safe and Supported, who we did some training with, and they make trainings available to people if y'all want to do a training with them. You can check out their website, which is abortioninfo.org. And SAS has on their website that data shows, and studies have shown, that misoprostol and mifepristone are safer than Tylenol. Tylenol you can buy over the counter, like a little kid could go in and buy Tylenol at the Circle K right now, and nobody would bat an eyelash. But it's actually a more dangerous drug than abortion pills are. And that's supported by research and data that it should be, because it's so safe, readily available over the counter to people who want it. And the reasons that it's not is because of Christian bullshit and because of misogyny and people who hate women and other people who can become pregnant. So I just thought I'd throw that out there, that's why we're having this conversation tonight. So I'm going to talk about misoprostol because it's a drug that's just out there. And it's something that can be easily accessed by people regardless of what certain laws are in the state that you live in, because abortion pills are available through the mail. And you can check out planc.org or aidaccess.org for more information about how to obtain abortion pills. So when you use misoprostol for an abortion, it's a very simple regimen that the World Health Organization has recommended that people do. And what the World Health Organization says is that you need 12 misoprostol pills, and those pills should be 200 micrograms each. And so they come in a little packet, and they're already 200 micrograms each, and there's already 12 of them in the packet. And then the World Health Organization says that you take 4 pills and you place them under your tongue and you let them dissolve for 30 minutes. And then you don't eat or drink during that part. So while they're dissolving in your mouth, you're not drinking stuff, you're not eating stuff. Maybe you set a little timer on your phone and let them fully dissolve. If there's anything left in your mouth at the end of 30 minutes, then you would just swallow what's left in your mouth. And then you wait for 3 hours and you do it again. And you do that process, according to the World Health Organization, the process happens 3 times. So 12 pills in total. And then you wait for miscarriage symptoms to begin. And that can take anywhere from 2 hours to 10 hours. That's a range of normal. But when people talk about range of normal in medical terms, range of normal is so huge. And so some people experience cramping and bleeding 15 minutes after dissolving the first set of pills in their mouth. Some people don't experience anything at all until 24 hours later. Okay, so that's the World Health Organization's recommendations about abortion pills. These same recommendations are in this very cute comic poster. You could take this with you and you could hang it up or you could give it to a buddy. And wouldn't it be so great if everywhere you went, it was just like, here's the instructions about how to have an abortion. And it's just so, the information is so accessible. That is what I hope will come out of these workshops happening in different places, and that you will proliferate the information. But there's a few things that I also would be remiss not to tell you. So you want to know what to expect. And I'll say that I've had a medication abortion using abortion pills. And I've also had a surgical abortion. And a medication abortion is a very chill thing for lots of people. And some people experience more extreme symptoms than others. In the same way that people who have a uterus and menstruate, some people experience more extreme menstruation symptoms than others. And it really depends on the individual person and how their body is responding to the medication and to the like physical mechanics of a induced miscarriage or abortion. But some of the things that people do typically experience: vomiting, fever, diarrhea, or headaches. A lot of times people think, if I have a fever, that's very scary. But according to the World Health Organization and according to SAS, which is Self-Managed Abortion, Safe and Supported, they say that the only time you need to be concerned about a fever is if it's over 100 degrees for more than 24 hours, because a fever can be a side effect of a miscarriage itself or abortion, or it can be a side effect of the medication that you take. The other things that they say you want to watch out for are bleeding and keeping an eye on bleeding.
Should we this is a little bit getting into
Oh my God, your care
section,
package.
so perhaps we can
We'll swap.
team. Once one has obtained the pills to undergo their self-managed abortion, they should prepare to have it at a place that they feel comfortable. Most people have it at home, but like Hava mentioned, you want to be close to a hospital, so that might not be your home. So maybe one would get a hotel room or an Airbnb, or stay with a friend, or just somehow be in a place where one would feel okay having the common symptoms that one could experience. So lots of pain, perhaps, maybe very little pain, but you sort of want to plan for the worst, right? So someone could be in a lot of pain, they could have a lot of nausea, they could vomit, they could have a fever, they could just feel not great. And so it's recommended that you, as much as possible, take 2 full days off of your life. So have as little responsibility. If you could one could get off of work, off of school, to find childcare, and just because everybody is so different, and it's really difficult to know how your specific body is going to react to these pills. One wants to have the time to just focus on just letting the body go through the process in a supported way. So in order to illustrate that, I packed myself a little abortion kit that is stuff that I would want to have with me would I be going through this process. So I've got Dramamine to take care of any nausea that could happen. And I have, where's my other pill bottle? I have ibuprofen. So it's recommended that, if someone is in pain, you should try to not be in pain if that feels better to you. So you could take the ibuprofen an hour before you take the first pills, or one takes the first pills, and then just follow the directions. Take it if someone's still feeling pain as often as you can. Tylenol is not as effective, but you can swap them so that one is able to get more pain coverage over the amount of time that you're experiencing pain. I also have some essential oils because those make me feel comfortable and happy. I have plenty of pads because there's lots of bleeding. That's kind of one of the main things. I also have some tea, and that's it in here. Hava mentioned having someone support you, and ideally you would have someone in person. You don't necessarily need to be like interacting with them all the time, but just like in the next room or something. If that's not something that feels possible or something that feels like what you would want, just, going through this process, you might feel like one would rather just be alone. Good to have a friend or someone know that you're going through this and just be able to check in with them to make sure that things are going the way that you expect them to, and that key things that we need to watch out for are not happening. So this is what I was getting into and that I interrupted them about, because I was like, well, I was going to talk about that. But so the things that could go wrong, as we mentioned, it's very safe, happens very rarely. In fact, the complications from self-managed abortion are pretty much the same as the complications from having a natural miscarriage that your body induces on its own. So, it's not that much, but the things that can happen are you could hemorrhage. There could be something happening where you're just bleeding uncontrollably. If that happens, and the way that we determine that is if one is soaking 2 pads an hour for 2 hours in a row, you need to go to the emergency room right away. That's no ifs, ands, or buts. That's what is needed, because that's why you have to be so close to a hospital, because that is the major thing that could go wrong. Something else that could go wrong is that a pregnancy could be implanted not in the uterus. It's called an ectopic pregnancy. Most often it is implanted in the uterine tubes. Could be anywhere though. And no other part of the body is designed to grow and accept a growing egg and fetus in the way that the uterus is. So it is actually an obstetric emergency to have an ectopic pregnancy. How you would know that you have that is if you have extreme pain that is more than cramps, and it's not relieved by painkillers. It's probably something that you also need to go to the emergency room right away, because if that fetus, if that blastocyst, whatever it's called at that stage, continues to grow in a space that's not designed to grow with it, it can rupture that space, and then there can be internal bleeding and sepsis and terrible things. So those are the third thing you have to watch out for is an infection. And so Hava mentioned that could happen. You could have a fever as a result of that. So it mentioned if you have over 100 degrees for 24 hours, or if your fever ever gets to 102 degrees, if it reaches that mark, then you should also go seek medical care. Another symptom that one could experience that would be a clue that an infection was happening is if the discharge that was happening, what is coming out of one's body, is really foul smelling and is like yellowish or greenish and just doesn't look right. Looks and smells like this is beyond what, obviously you don't really know, but that's why it's good to have someone that you're checking in with. And there are also on this handy resource sheet that I've already mentioned has some hotlines that one could call if they had questions about, like, is this normal? What's going on? Because you're doing it, by yourself. That's the self-managed piece. So those hotlines, especially for medical piece, I would call the miscarriage and abortion hotline, or M&A hotline. And you can also go to the website, which is mahotline.org. And those are trained medical folks who could sort of talk you through some symptoms and let you know what needs to get further advice and what feels like it's maybe more normal. Other hotlines, Hava mentioned, Repro Legal Hotline. That's really if law enforcement is contacting you or you have some reason to be concerned about legal ramifications. So it's not as much like as the abortion is happening. And then we also have Repro Care, which is a little bit more of like a emotional support or, therapeutic communication, someone to talk you through. Someone is pregnant, they've got pregnancy hormones happening in their body. They also have this process happening, and pregnancy hormones maybe are going up and down, and it can be a lot. And so it would be wonderful if you could talk to your support person and have that more close connection with somebody that you already know, but not everyone has that. So there is that hotline that you can access. All right, so that's what to look out for. Those are the signs. If those things happen, you should seek medical care. And when you seek medical care, like mentioned before, the way that a self-managed abortion, the processes it's triggering in your body is the same as the processes that happen when one's body is terminating a pregnancy, inducing a miscarriage on its own. So you go to the emergency room, say, I'm pregnant and I'm bleeding. I'm bleeding and I don't know why. Like, I'm having extreme bleeding. You don't have to say more than that. The care that you will get from the medical providers thinking that you're having a bodily induced miscarriage as opposed to a self-managed abortion is the exact same. It does not matter. And that's also why we have you use the pills through your mouth so that you can swallow them. One way that you can also use the pills is by putting them in one's vagina, but there could be remnants in there, and that could be a clue to medical providers that you underwent this process. So just better to do it in the mouth where you can swallow the remnants. All right, so other than that, you just really want to, like I said, take these 2 days off and prepare as much ahead of time as possible. So that means doing laundry so that you have comfy, clean clothes to be in, providing meals. So I've got my favorite sweats. I've got a hot water bottle, planning meals and snacks. So going grocery shopping ahead of time and just having things that you can reheat, and or having a plan for eating out if that makes more sense in your situation. And, things to do. So listening to music, I've got a coloring book and a regular book to read, just things that comfort you and that you would want to do when you're going through something that can be quite uncomfortable and maybe not. So that was the self-care piece, but the community care piece is how can anyone else support someone who is going through this? So it's really up to that person whether they want to have anyone else involved, but if you let someone know ahead of time that you are a safe person to talk about these things with, and that you would be happy to help in any way possible, like providing meals, like providing childcare, like providing a place to be if they live far away from a hospital, or if they just want that to not be at their home because there's too much chores or whatever happening there. So just really being a friend and showing hospitality and knowing that outside of giving someone pills, which is not legal outside of a clinic currently, anything else that you're doing to support someone who's undergoing this is totally legal and fine and good, and just being a good friend. So driving someone to the hospital if they need to, or providing the other kinds of support that I was just saying are good ways that we can support folks that are going through this self-managed process, which can be a little scary to do it on your own. So to have people there that support you and have your back can be really, really helpful.
On Aid Access's website, they have doctors that are located in the European Union, and then after you communicate with them, they send the prescription to a pharmacy that fulfills the prescription that's based out of India, and then they're shipped to you by mail. It's an excellent resource, but what it means is that you need to know that you are pregnant as quickly as possible, because it can take they advise people, up to 4 weeks. And so it's best to, according to the World Health Organization, use the pills at less than 12 weeks or less. The same thing with Plan C. So those are fulfilled by pharmacies located in the United States and happen through telemedicine, but also they could get to you. I think the fastest we found was, they say, 7 days.
Yeah.
And so that might be a better option for someone who's further along. And Aid Access is a good option the earlier someone knows, in part because it's the least expensive. And they also provide, they have their own system of providing financial support to people who cannot afford it. They charge a baseline of $150 through Aid Access for the pills to mail them to you. And if you can't afford that, they will work with you as much as to cover it all the way. Whereas if you go through Plan C's various options, it's more like $300, $200, and there's not something built into that system for funding. And yeah, so Aid Access is the organization that will send them to you so that you can have them on hand. And abortion pills have a long shelf life, so they can be shelf stable. Expiration dates are 3 to 5 years, depending on the type and brand. And so I think it's like the kind of thing where people should if you have the capacity to get pregnant, you should keep abortion pills in your house in case you need them. And then you have them when you need them instead of scrambling later. It would be so cool if we just all shared the information that you can order them in advance and have them on hand.
I'm going to cover briefly some security things, and we have handouts as well. So I'll go through that quickly. And then I think we just have quick closing. And then if there's any questions, you can come ask. I just wanted to let you all know we're wrapping up soon. But keep asking questions if you have them. So I wanted to talk a little bit about tech security. So this is really scary as we're reading the news, knowing that our data is being tracked, and reading things that maybe if you're Googling about abortions, if you're going to clinics that provide abortions, especially if you live in states maybe like Texas or other states that are prosecuting people, we want to talk about ways to keep yourself as safe as possible and prevent data from possibly being tracked. So I already talked about Yuki and Clue, which are safe period tracking and ovulation tracking apps. Just a couple other things, which we have these handouts in English and in Spanish, and you can take these with you or take pictures. It recommends using DuckDuckGo maybe instead of Google, which is it encrypted?
It just doesn't collect any data.
Okay, thank you. So it doesn't collect any data, whereas Google, we know, does. So using DuckDuckGo is safer. Turning off location sharing on your devices. So this could be your phones or laptops, anything that you're using to look this information up. And then also when talking about chatting online, messaging services. So our group uses Signal a lot. Signal is an app that you can download on your phone, and it is encrypted. And so information isn't shared. You can be texting people about these services, about information sharing, questions that you may have, or maybe your support system who was with you when maybe you were doing a self-managed abortion, maybe they had to leave, or you're checking in with people. You can use something like Signal to share information or talk about this, and it won't be tracked. So there really is so much information on this, and I don't want to cover everything, but I would really encourage you to take a poster home and share it with your friends or just have it on hand. And I will pass it back to Hava.
Okay, I know it's getting late, but we just wanted to cover just a couple of other really quick things. It can be very scary. People start talking about, oh my gosh, encrypt all your information, finding out about abortion, or if you might need one. And there's a new scary news story every day that I'm sure is popping up on your social media feeds, or if you're like me, you open the news in the morning when you're still fully horizontal for some reason, you're doom scrolling at 6:30 a.m. But I think it's really, really, really important that we don't get caught up in the whirl and twirl of the doomy, scary things. What's more important is that in this moment, we all share as much of this kind of information as possible, and actually that we be really bold about it. I'm not advocating that you do things that are beyond your comfort level, but I want to remind you that it is not illegal for you to share information. It's not illegal for us to be talking about abortion pills and self-managed abortion. It's not illegal to even say that there's really cool websites that'll help you get those pills. Those things aren't illegal. And so instead of getting caught up in the like scary thing, which is what people who want to limit our autonomy want to be happening right now, instead we can just be really bold and acting as a community together. There's very cute posters that say in Spanish and English that abortion access is a community responsibility. And I want to underscore, I was brought up in a world where if you were you had an abortion, you should feel bad because you weren't responsible. That's bullshit, and it's not true. Abortion is a form of birth control. It's a way that people can control their fertility, and we've been doing that as people who have the capacity to get pregnant for as long as humans have had the capacity to get pregnant. Other mammals in the mammal kingdom actually do things to control their fertility. So that's a natural thing, and it's older and way more fucking popular than the police, the law, a bunch of dorks sitting on a bench in a court in DC wearing goofy robes and collars. And so we should just be telling everybody all of this great stuff that we learned tonight. And if you're interested in being a part of a study group, like we mentioned before, we're going to start a new session of study group in September. It meets once a week for a couple of hours, and we move through a set curriculum. The set curriculum for the Hysteria Study Group is learning about anatomy and physiology. I had been a birth worker for full spectrum doula care for many years. And what I came to understand is that lots of people who have the capacity to get pregnant literally don't even know what's happening in their body before they even get pregnant or how menstruation works. And that's the norm. And so knowing how our bodies work is the first thing that we focus on in the study group. After anatomy and physiology, we do study session and reading about fertility awareness and how to be aware and how to also share information with people. And then we talk about self-managed abortion and other forms of abortion, because the idea is that then you feel fully empowered to talk about all that stuff with people. And people, when they know that, you become a resource, and you're fulfilling that communal obligation that we have to each other to provide mutual aid and care to one another, because that's what we should do for other humans. So if you want to come to Hysteria Study Group, that's going to start in September. It meets on Wednesdays at BCC. You can look at bcctucson.org or on our social media on Instagram, which is at BCCTucson. And the last thing that I forgot to mention is that lots of people have lots of feelings after they have an abortion. And I just want to say that if you've had an abortion, or someone you know is going to have one, and I guarantee someone you know is going to have an abortion, because people be having abortions if they haven't already. But people feel a lot of different ways. And it's okay for people to have sad feelings. It's also okay for people to have no feelings. And for them to just be like, yeah, that was a thing, and I took a pill, or I went to a doctor and they did a procedure and I wasn't pregnant anymore and it was fucking sick. That's how I felt about my abortion, was that's so great, I'm not pregnant anymore. And other people have a lot of intense emotions, and all of those things are okay. And promoting the wide variety of ways to feel, I think, is also a really important thing that I hope y'all walk away with. Along with that, we should be fucking talking about it and sharing the information on how to do it. So thanks for coming, hang out in the park. I'm so glad it didn't rain. Take a fizzy water or some stuff. And thanks so much.